Right, good evening. Shavua Tov. Hope all of you are doing well, ready to get started. We're going to be learning Maseches Rosh Hashana Daf Chaf Beis, and we're starting halfway down on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis at the new Mishnah. Things will move pretty quickly tonight. We'll be ending at the Mishnah that's about 15 lines or so from the bottom of Chaf Beis Amud Beis, and then we will call it a night. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the Edus itself. Who is allowed to represent? When should they come to Beis Din? V'chule. So let's get started with the new Mishnah. Again, a little bit more than halfway down on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Bein shenir be'alil, whether the moon is shown be'alil. We'll see soon in the Gemara that this means that it's nigle, that it's very revealed, everybody sees it. Bein shelo nir be'alil, that it's not perfectly clear, it's harder to see. Either way, mechalel l'nalav es haShabbos. The halacha is that one is allowed to be mechalel Shabbos in order to give this edus. Rabbi Yossi Omer, im nire be'alil, if in fact it's visible to all, ein mechalel l'nalav es haShabbos. Why do I need you? Sanhedrin will look outside, it's nire be'alil, everyone can see it. What's the when we have a need to be Mechal Shabbos, it doesn't mean you have a mitzvah to be Mechal Shabbos. Okay, you have a need to be Mechal Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi is cholek, and he says that if in fact it's near be'alil, that the moon, it's so obvious, everybody sees the moon, Sanhedrin will see it too, then there's no need to be Mechal Shabbos, ein Mechal l'nalav es haShabbos. That's a big nafkamina between the two shitas. And in fact, says the Mishnah, Maisa, she'avru yoser me'arba'im zug, there were more than 40 pairs that were on their way to go give edus. The ikveim Rabbi Akiva belod, and Rabbi Akiva will soon see that this is not so simple. The ikve Rabbi Akiva ikveim, he held them back. He said, no, don't go. Why didn't he tell them to go? Because it was near be'alil. They saw that it was perfectly visible. Why do I need you? We got Sanhedrin. I don't need you to do it. I don't need an aid. This is obvious. Shalach lo Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says, seemingly to Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara again will uproot this. If you stop people from coming to give testimony, then if you don't let these guys go, even though the moon is clear as day, clear as night, whatever the phrase is, then even though that's true, you can't stop people from going. Why? Because then in the future, they may not go again. This svara is employed by Hatzalah. Why are you allowed to go to an emergency? Because it's pikuach nefashos. Great. Solve the problem, get the patient to the hospital, but why are you allowed to drive home? So Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about this. The reason why you're allowed to drive home is because if every time you had to go on a Hatzalah call on Friday night at midnight, you had to stay the rest of Shabbos or walk home, you're going to hesitate the next time you take a call. And therefore, Moshe says the ride home, you're allowed because of Safek Bikuach Nefashos in a future case. So it's a similar svara here. The reason we allow you to go be Mechal Shabbos here by the Eidos for Kiddush HaChodesh is because if you don't go now, even though it's obvious, if you don't go now, we're afraid that next month, when it's obvious again, you won't show up. And therefore, says the Mishnah, that we should therefore allow Chil Shabbos to take place. Says the Gemara, how do we know that this language of alil, my mashma dehai alil lishna de miglehu? How do we know that the word alil means that something is revealed? Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Kra, it's based on the pasuk. What does the pasuk say? The pasuk reads, Imaros Hashem, Amaros Tehoros. The statements of Hashem are very pure statements. Kesef Tzaruf. It is as though it is refined silver. Be'alil la'aret, and it's revealed to the land. And the pasuk concludes, Mezukak Shivasayim, and it will benefit everyone sevenfold. Rav Shmuel, this is totally off the rails here. This has nothing to do with the Gemara at all, but it's just a play on the pasuk. Shivasayim means 7 times 7. So it means that there's 49. What is 49? Referencing Rabbi Shmuel. Machlokes in the early Amoraim, we're about 12 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph from Beis, says the Gemara, Chad Amar, Nun Share Bina Nivru Ba'olam. There really are 50 levels of Bina in the world. V'chula nitnu leMoshe chaser echad. Moshe was on the 49th level of Bina, which is just fascinating because he pulled out the Jews who were on the 49th level of Tumah. So the only person who would be shaykh to extract someone who's on the 49th level of Tumah is someone who understands how to pull them out from each of those levels of Tumah. That's on more on the metaphysical plane about how Moshe did what he did. That Moshe lacked only a little bit of God. He only had 49 out of the 50 levels only. He only had 49 out of, we have 0. So we're not really in much competition here. But so Moshe had 49 of those levels. Says the Gemara, Bikesh Koheles limso divrei chayfetz. Bikesh Koheles. Koheles is Shlomo. Bikesh, he requested limso divrei chayfetz, to have the desirable, to have the knowledge. Bikesh Koheles Yozke Moshe. He wanted to also have the mem test Sharei Bina. He wanted that. Yotzes a baskol v'amrlo. Then there was a baskol that came out of heaven. What did the baskol say? V'chasuv Yosher divrei emes. Yosher. Yosher is a reference to Sefer Dvarim, which is referred to by some as the Sefer HaYoshar. And we need to say that those words are emes. What does it say in Sefer Dvarim? V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. No other Nevi'im would be like Moshe. So that's one approach. Moshe had the 49 levels. Shlomo wanted it, but couldn't get it. If you also notice that Moshe and Shlomo is Lim Moshe, he wanted to be like Moshe, very, very similar words. Anyways, that's Shita number one. Shita number two, 5 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, V'chad Amar b'Nevi'im lo kam b'Melachim kam, that it's true that by Nevi'im, this by us is so obvious that Moshe was the greatest of the great when it came to Chachma. When it came to being a Navi, but says the Gemara that when it comes to Malachim, the kings actually could access the 49 levels of Bina. So that's what the Gemara says, that maybe Shlomo Taka could have reached that level of 49 levels of Bina. What then does the pasuk mean? That he wanted to have those 49 levels. That's how we just gave shot according to the first of the Amoraim that we just saw. Says the Gemara, really, Bikesh Koheles ladun dinin shebelev. Really, Shlomo wanted to have a level of wisdom where he would be able to paskin shailas in Bezdin without Eidim and without Hasra. That's an unbelievably high level of clarity. There are books out on this about face reading and about body language. I've read a couple of them. Some of them are fascinating. How many of them are admissible in court, I don't know. But the Gemara here is saying an idea. That really, Bikesh Koheles ladun din and shebelef, he wanted to make it so that he wouldn't eat anything. Yotzes baskol v'amrlo, no. V'chasuv yosher divrei emes. We have to do that which is yosher and emes al pi shnayim edim. I've shared this many moons ago when we were learning Maseches Nida before the turn of the new cycle. I've shared it once or twice before. My chavrusa in Smicha for Hilchos Nida told me that he had a friend who paskined his own Hilchos Nida based on the Gemara of Maseches Nida, without Rishonim, just the way that he understood the Gemara, which means that he's not a from Jew, because there's no possible way that someone could learn the Gemara Maseches Nida and paskin basically anything unless it was absolutely blaring in the Gemara. For example, we know that a woman could be poreses nida. It's easy to be machmer in hilchos nida, but to paskin kulas, no way. I've heard from Rabbi First and from Rabbi Robinson some of the craziest, wildest psukim that if you just learned Shas, you would have assumed that it would be Nisr Daraisa. But hearing them in the context of psak and the development of halacha from the Gemara to Rishonim to the Shulchan Aruch and the Nosei Kalim and the Achronim and the Poskim, much more sophisticated. So that's, again, on a frum way. If Shlomo wanted to have that level of wisdom, says the Gemara, you can't do that. Ella, it has to be Alpi Shnaim Edim. That brings us to the top of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Let's continue. The Gemara says that there was a story in our Mishnah, that Rabbi Akiva withheld 40 people from going to give Edus on Shabbos. Don't be Machal Shabbos. It's near Be'alil. Everything can be seen. So why are you going to be Machal Shabbos? So it says the Gemara, Tanya the Brisa writes, there's no way that Rabbi Akiva would have ever done such a thing. No way. Talmud Chacham like that. There's no possible chance that he would have done that. So it says the Gemara, Ela Shazefer, this is a person's name, Rosh Shel Geder, who was the head of a place called Geder Ikvan. He was the one who held them back. The Shalach Rabban Gamliel Varidu Migdulaso, and he was demoted from his position as a mayor or whatever the role was that he had in the community. And so the Gemara says it was not Rabbi Akiva. New Mishnah. We know, of course, that under a chuppah, I was just at someone's house, a secular Jewish couple, and they said to me, oh, by the way, in addition to brisses, do you do any other rabbinic things? I said, I try to avoid pretty much everything else, but I have done weddings before. They said, yeah, we actually had a question about our wedding. Is it a problem that our Eidim were related to one another? I'm like, I just circumcised your baby, so you have some significant problems. So the poskim discuss this in halacha of what happens if a couple doesn't have a halachically kosher marriage. Are they married halachically? L'may nafkamina, mamzerus would be a nafkamina. Let's say they get secularly divorced and she has a baby with another man. Is that mamzerus? So these are good shilas in halacha. So the poskim discussed this idea about whether the tashmish amita that the couple had right when they got married was l'shem ishus, was for the sake of this is a big deal in the poskim. Okay, that's a discussion. Anyways, I said to them, you do need to get a you do need to get remarried halachically with an appropriate ksuba, with Eidim who are Shomer Shabbos, which is certainly not the case in regards to their Eidim. They had a double knock that they were not from, which is a psul mamish. Even if only one Eid is puzzle, doesn't matter. Either Rosh, either Shechino, and they they were all related.
What's the status of the kid then?
Nothing. It's the kid's fine. The kid's fine. It's just and the tashmish amita, the actual intercourse might be problematic halachically because you're not married.
It's not the kid's problem.
It's not the kid's problem, and it doesn't really change anything in regards to the kid. He's not a mamzer, but that was the shiloh about if she were to, in theory, let's say if she were to cheat, or even if she were to get a secular divorce and then have a baby with another man, was that first kedushin a kedushin? That's a great shiloh.
Better to let them stay not halachically married because of those issues you're bringing up.
Because you can't be sure she would get a proper get alone, and you've got something to fall back on.
No, but that's not like you don't have to assume a divorce necessarily. I don't know.
Have you seen the statistics?
I have seen the statistics. I don't know. How far does it go? Do you have to make such an assumption? Secular Jews shouldn't have halachic marriages?
There is such an approach so that there's something to fall back on, because perhaps they will get a proper get.
There was a famous shaila that was brought to Rav Moshe Feinstein about this, where a woman had gotten married on some army base, and then she got divorced. And nobody knew if there was a kedushin to start with, but she had some kind of divorce, and then she remarried, and she had a baby. So all of this was built on a svek sveka. Safek if you got divorced, and even if you didn't get divorced, maybe your first kedushin is svek sveka. The problem is that according to Ashkenazim are not allowed to build their own svek svekos. The kuntras svek svekos lahashach doesn't allow such a thing. So Rav Moshe Feinstein very, very carefully guided them at the time to Rav Ovadia Yosef, and they said, go only to one person on planet Earth. Go to Rav Ovadia Yosef, and Rav Ovadia Yosef built a svek sveka for them so that the child would not be a mamzer. That's incredible. Anyways, this is a little different. We're talking about Kiddush HaChodesh here. So what about the Eidos for Kiddush HaChodesh? The level of intensity can drop a little bit. There's no mamzerus, but maybe, but even that, we're not so concerned about that. The quality of their Eidos might not be so bad. So let's see. That's subject to a machlokes tanaim as well. 4 lines down, Chad Beis Amud Aleph, new Mishnah. Av ubno sheros hachodesh yelchu. They should go. Now, lo shemitzdarfen zeh, they're not allowed to give testimony together. Ella, they, in and of themselves, they're not. It's not supposed to be. Is it a psul deraisa? Unclear from the Mishnah what the actual psul would be, but it seems from our Mishnah that it's not allowed. And that's the Tana Kama of Shimon Omer. Av ubno v'chol hakrovin ksherin le'edus hachodesh. All of them are allowed. No problem at all. Nothing wrong with it at all. And it's only when it comes to Hilchos Ishus and other areas of Edus as well where we have such a problem. Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi says that there's a story. Let's see whose side the story supports. This was a person. It was he and his son and his freed slave. The Kohanim, when they got to the Beis Hamikdash, they said, we're only going to take the father and the son, but the Eved is no good. But when they finally got to Sanhedrin to actually give their Havana, to give their ages, Kiblu Osov es Avdo upaslo es Beno. That's very interesting, because that seems to support the sheets of the Tanakama, that Av and Beno cannot be used together, but the Eved Meshuchrar, remember the keyword Meshuchrar, because if he's not Meshuchrar, he has the halachic status of an Isha within terms of Edus. He's not allowed to give Edus. But once an Eved is Meshuchrar, then he has the halachic status of a full-fledged Jew. So therefore, it seems from the story and from the conclusion of the Mishnah that we paskin like the Tanakama. We'll discuss this in the Gemara. Amar of Levi, my time of the Reb Shimon. Why are we allowed to, right? You're going to try and tell me that over here brothers are allowed to give edus together. That's never allowed anywhere on Mehechatesi. How could that even be? So the Gemara gives a gorgeous answer. 1/3 of the way down on Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Look at the pasuk in Chumash. Vayomer Hashem El. Who are the two people we're talking to? El Moshe vel Aaron, brothers. The Eretz Mitzrayim lemor achodesh hazelachem edus zu tehekshir bachem. This type of edus can be kosher even with the two of you. So that's a pasuk mefureshas b'Torah to show you that brothers are allowed to give edus in this context and in this context only. It's the anomaly. It's not the norm. The Rabbanon, how do the rabbis learn this? Says the Gemara, Eidus zo tehe mesura lochem. This should be given to you. Now, these words are difficult to understand, and thankful to Rashi for his clarity. Fourth line on the page in Rashi, Dibra Maschal tehe mesura lochem, lechashuve hador ani moser. Only to the great people of the generations, not the regular people. The pasuk wasn't coming along to teach us that brothers are allowed. The pasuk was only coming to teach us that the chashuve hador are allowed to do so. A little bit, almost halfway down. So then we saw the next shita in the Gemara that Tuvia Harofe, the story, the way that it played out was that. It seems to be that siblings are not allowed, or father-son was not allowed. Amar Rav Chanan, this is very difficult Gemara. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Hilchasa Reb Shimon. The Gemara says that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. Let's look back in the Mishnah, fourth line of the Mishnah. It says, Av ubno v'chol akrobim ksherin le'edus hachodesh. Says the Gemara, and this is a principle when it comes to psak. When you see two shitas in the Mishnah, and one of the shitas has a story, so the maisa is the machriya. That's what the Gemara says. Hold on one second. Allah is like Reb Shimon, who says that we're makel to allow siblings and father-son to give edus. How can that be? Amar le Rav Huna le Rav Chanan bar Abba, Reb Yossi u Maisa. We have Reb Yossi and we have a story. That breaks the rules of psak. When you have an uvza, when you have an actual case, then of course we should be under the assumption that the halacha is like that opinion. So why would you say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon when b'pashtus we should assume that the halacha is like Reb Yossi? That because at the end of the Mishnah we said no father and son, but rather father and Eved Meshuchrar. Great, but don't give me this whole thing about that we paskin like Reb Shimon. We have a Maisa and we have Reb Yossi. We should paskin like Reb Yossi. So it says the Gemara, Amar lo, that's so strange. I've said many times in front of Rav that the halacha is like Reb Shimon and not like, and he never complained. He never said anything to me. So Amar le hechi tanis, how did you teach the Mishnah? Amar le ipcha. I taught the Mishnah with reversed shitas. Namely, I said that Reb Shimon was the one who didn't allow for siblings and parents and children to give edus together. Amar le, well, you're not the sharpest tack on the board over there. Of course, he didn't argue with you when you said that Reb Shimon had Reb Yossi's shita. That's obvious. Amar le, mishamachi lo amar lach v'lo midi, because you had the wrong shita. And then the Gemara says, and this is where we have a real challenge in the Girsa. Amar tavi berei demari, Amar tavi berei demari tavi. Amar Mar Ukva, Amar Shmuel, Hilchas Reb Shimon. What's Reb Shimon? The Reb Shimon that he presented incorrectly that was Reb Yossi, or is it the Reb Shimon that we have as it's displayed in our Mishnah? And if you look at the little footnote on the side, it'll say Ein Hilchas Reb Shimon. Very confusing in regards to Psak Halacha. If we used the logic that the Gemara employed so far, we would assume that it should be Ein Hilchas Reb Shimon, because again, we have the Maisa and we have the Shitas Reb Yossi. That brings us to the next Mishnah, and we have two left in the parak. Let's continue. Elu hein hapsulin. The following people are not allowed to be Eidim. In regards to what? So l'chora, in regards to the context that we're discussing, we're talking about Eidus for this purpose. Although we do know that this applies in other areas as well. This is quoted in Maseches Sanhedrin for Eidus in general. And for those who gamble heavily, this is a Gemara for you. Elu hein hapsulin hamesachek bekubia. Rashi is a quarter of the way down. They would cut shapes out of bone, and they would make bets with one another. And the rabbi said, Asmachta lo kanya. Asmachta lo kanya, that means that if we're gambling, so you and I are making a deal with one another, that I'm letting you take my money if I lose, and you're letting me take your money if you lose. But says the Gemara, this asmachta, this deal that you're making is lo kanya. And look at the rest of Rashi, a very sharp line. V'harehein gazlonin midarabanan. To gamble with one another is gzela derabanan. Dimi deoraisa eino karari gazlan. The reason why it's not a din deoraisa is because I'm letting you do it. But asmachta lo kanya, because the deal that we made doesn't actually have a halachic mechanism, so therefore it's an isser derabanan. You're taking from me. I'm kind of letting you, but you're still taking from me. To be the rice, you have to actually grab it out of someone's hand for it to be gzela. But here, asmachta lo kanya, so that's why a masachik bekubia, when people gamble with one another, it's a good shaila. I don't know. Rashi makes it very difficult to gamble with one another straight up. I don't know the halachos here. I don't know. I'm not sure. How much? Can I get in? I just want to know. I can arrange for this. I mean, there's one person in this room who can control what time we finish Daf Yomi. If you would have said 9 o'clock, we really could have had a real conversation. Fascinating. So these are complex. Halachos Sfardim are super makbid about it. Even in Eretz Yisrael, where all the money goes to the mifal hapayis, where the money goes to the educational system, it's also not so simple. The lottery money, not so pashut. So by Sfardim, they're pretty makbid. There are kulas for Ashkenazim. I don't know what they are. I'm not saying there aren't any. I just don't know. I don't know the sugya well enough to speak about it in depth. So that's one psul, is mesachek b'kubya, umalve beribis, those who lend with ribis. It's very interesting to be malve beribis is an isser daraisa. The reason why it's not categorized as mamish its own isser daraisa is because if you and I make a deal, even though the deal is be'isser and you agree to pay with interest, it's the same as the mesachek b'kubya. I'm not grabbing your money. It's that every time you write me back the check, you're adding 10% or 5%. So instead of the $1,000, you pay me $1,050, but you wrote me the check. You're doing it willingly, even though it's usser. So therefore, this case, yonim. Interesting. Rashi here took a look at mafricha yonim halfway down. Hainunami ken kubya itakteme yonech liyoni. We're racing the pigeons, right? We're going to see the pig races. When we went once with our family, we saw these pig races. It was unbelievable. The game psychology, how rapidly we got bought up in which pig was going to win. We were standing up and screaming like a bunch of crazy people about these pigs that we had no money on. They were all just had a little colored coat on them, blue, red, whatever it was. It's crazy. Something happened to us. It was very weird. What? Right. You're supposed to be Masachek B'Kubya. Yeah, while you're in a swimming pool on Shabbos. It says Gemara v'sochrei shvius v'avadim.
Now you're talking about my heaven.
Can we just not even catch? It's betting on pigs in a pool on Shabbos with a new haircut. That's great. V'sochrei Shabbos v'avadim. So all of these things are all woven in together. Says the Gemara, Ze'aklal, called edus she'ein isha kshera la, anything that a woman cannot give edus on, af hein einon ksherin la. Then even the cases that we listed in the beginning of our Mishnah would not be allowed, which has a very unique implication, says the Gemara, ha'isha kshera la, af hein ksherin la, that had it been that a woman could give edus here, then we allow these people who have the status of an isser derabanan upon them to give edus as well, which is a very unique halacha. Amar Ravashi zosameres gazlan de divrei kashal edus isha. And that's what the Gemara says explicitly in the name of Ravashi. The diuk is correct, that if in fact there was a gazlan de divrehim, there was a gazlan who was only in the status of rabbinic violation. The halacha is that he could give edus isha in regards to edus isha. What does that mean? What's edus isha? So take a look at Rashi. Rashi is 3/4 of the way down. Dibra maschale edus isha lehatira lehinase. In order to get her out of a case of aguna, but dafka gazlan de divrehim, but only if their status of gzela was derabanan. However, about gazlan doraisa the chatzif lavor befarhesia lo chshiru chachamim leedus isha v'af b'shech shiur asa eved v'asa isha de psule doraisa. Even though a woman is pasul midoraisa, she could give edus to be matir aguna. So these are all the 9/11 shilas. They saw some person X jump out of a building, and he would say, "Please tell my wife that I jumped out of a building." And they would go tell the Rav, and the Rav would have to say, "What did you say?" All the shilas that they'd have to ask the Nebuch, all the awful shilas that came out. But a woman can give edus under those circumstances. So wherever a woman can give edus, then a person who has an otherwise psul derabanan is allowed to give edus as well. Last mission in the parak. A person saw the new month, but they are immobile. Put him on the back of a donkey, drag him on a bed. If it's a dangerous road, we will see in the Gemara that the Baitusim, that these people wanted specifically to ruin our calendar. And because they wanted to ruin our calendar, they would, slash tires, and they would make it whatever that meant back in the day. They would make it very difficult for people to travel. So if they were going to be attacked, they could bring sticks, a baseball bat, whatever the weapon of the century was. If it was very far, they could even carry food. Again, we're talking chutz l'tchum. That was the issue that we're talking about, is traveling outside. One is allowed to travel night and day on Shabbos in order to give Eretz HaChodesh. And Amar Elam Yikrei Hashem Yikrei Kodesh Asher Tikro Samim Ma'adam Hadron Allah Arba Rosh Hashanah Yiratzim, which come back to this daf in 7.5 years. We're actually going to continue straight in with the same exact sugya. Interesting, the parak breaks here because the topics don't really change that much. Says the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom at the beginning of the new parak. Parak im einan makirin. Says the Mishnah, if Sanhedrin doesn't recognize oso, we have to look at the words here. Oso is in the singular. If the Sanhedrin doesn't recognize him, we don't know what that means yet. If it doesn't recognize him, the Mishalchen imo acher lehaido. So let's say that I'm going, Sanhedrin doesn't know me, I'm a regular Jew, they don't know me, but I bring in someone who's a representative of the community that everybody knows. So they say, I know Phil's a reliable guy, he can give edus. That's what the Mishnah says. But initially they would take edus hachodesh from everyone, and once the Baitusim started to mess around and they started to give, we'll see a great story in the Gemara today, where they tried and failed. Once they started to try and mess up the way we were being Mekadesh HaChodesh, Ela Mina Makirin. At that point, they would not take any edus at all whatsoever unless it was someone that they trusted personally. I just had a discussion today with Betzalel Shur. It's very interesting. The OU was working on this as well, trying to give a hechsher to Stam, to Sifrei Torah and to Mezuzos, and it's really, really, really very simple to ruin a parsha. It doesn't take much. You have to not know a little bit about halacha. So the OU is working on this project. I was talking to Betzalel unrelated. I get tefillin from my son in Yirtzeh Hashem. So he's like, oh, we were talking about this project. He's like, it's kimat impossible because at the end of the day, you just need to trust the sofer. At the end of the day, what system are you going to put in place? You just need to have a relationship and trust the sofer to know that he's erlich, to know that he's a Talmud Chacham, he has to know the halachos of Safros. It's not simple. They're all computer checked. How do we know what computer software they're looking at? It's not. It's very, very complicated. And we've all heard the stories of the comic strips that are found inside of Parshas Rahman al-Islam. That's a terrible busha. The din of those people is not going to be great. But that's what the Gemara says here. At the end of the day, because of the Baitusim, the only people they would trust for Edus HaChodesh were people who were Makirin. And that's the end of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, the language is so strange. It says, Mishalchen imo acher lahaido. They would bring in one other person, singular. They'd bring in one other person to verify that the guy who was giving Edus was reasonable. Says the Gemara, my acher chad. It implies that there's only one other guy. Top of Chabez and Mabez. Says the Gemara, "V'chad mi mehemen." We trust this guy. Take a look at Rashi. This guy who's just he's a chaperone to say that the actual Edom are good. Who says that's enough? But we have a brisa. Plural. Edav. His witness is there were two people to verify. Says the Gemara, you're right. When our Mishnah says that we send acher with him, it doesn't mean we send only one person. It's zug acher. It's another pair with him. And it says, this is a very reasonable response because there's multiple uses of single reference words in our Mishnah. We have oso, which is what we're about to analyze now. Those 4 words belong in quotes. If they don't recognize him in the single, my oso, ilema oso chad. If you want to say that the guy that they're trying to prove this guy is one guy, v'chad mi mehemen, how can you have only one guy to give the edus? Says the Gemara, mishpat ksiv bey. The pasuk says mishpat. The whole pasuk is kichot Yisraelu mishpat leLokei Yaakov. It has to be a mishpat like we normally do in Besdin, which is with 2 people. It says Gemara, my oso hazug, and therefore our Mishnah, when it speaks all in the singular form, it really is in fact referencing pairs and not individuals. Hachanami mayacher zugacher. Says the Gemara, but wait 1 second. I have a story that goes against the basic din. Says the Gemara 7 lines down. I have a story where one guy was sufficient. That Rav Nehoroid accompanied the Edom that joined. He was Machal Shabbos. They walked past the Tchum, and it only says Rav Nehoroid's name. It doesn't add anybody else's name. So it seems to be that it should be absolutely mutter to have only one aid to verify. Says the Gemara, Amrei. No, Rav Nehoroi Sada Charina Haba Bahadeh. He had another witness with him. Bahadelo Chashiv Leimishum Kvodosh Rav Nehoroi. He's such a Chashav Yid, big Talmud Chacham. In a posek, they didn't want to mess. They didn't want to detract from his couple, so they only referenced him. But there really was someone else. Rav Ashi gave a different answer. Rav Ashi Amar 10 lines down, 12 lines down. Rav Nehoroi Sada Charina Haba Beusha. Actually, there was someone waiting for him there who also knew this witness. So let's say you lived in that city, and I lived in a different city with the witnesses. So I'm going to go knowing that we have a common friend who can verify you as a witness. Great, wonderful. So go do that. So it says the Gemara, well, if that's the case, then what was the whole point of the case of Rav No right? Says the Gemara that Ma'udetema misveika lo mechalelin on shabsa kamash malan. This is a knock your socks off sock. This is so strange. The Gemara says as follows. I live in Usha, and the Eidim live in Usha. I live in city X, and the Eidim live with me in city X, and we're going to Usha, but I don't know if you're home for Shabbos. Total suffix, 50-50. I have no idea where you are for Shabbos, and in their time, they may not have even known if the other person was alive. We have no idea. Can you be Machal Shabbos on the hunch that maybe the other guy in the other city who's going to be your pair, that maybe he's there? Says the Gemara, unbelievably, yes, Kamash Malan, that one is allowed to be Machal Shabbos, even Misveka. What about Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra? What about all the other halachos that we need to deal with that are very, very difficult? Tchum Shabbos, so very, very difficult Gemara, but that is in fact the psak. And then let's take this a step further, because thus far we've only been discussing in Eretz Yisrael. What about carrying this message to Bavel? Do we still need Eidim there? So says the Gemara, third of the way down. Ki asa Ula amar kidshua liyarcha b'ma'arava. Ula said when he got to Bavel that they sanctified the month in Ma'arava in the west in Eretz Yisrael, which means that Kiddush HaChodesh took place. Amar Rav Kahana, and by the way, how many people were there? Just one, just Ula. There was not witnesses, it was just Ula. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kahana, Lomi Baya Ula Degaver Rabbahu D'Mehemen. Of course, we're going to believe that one person when it's Eid Echad Ne'eman and B'Isurin, all the other halachic tools, but we're going to use to make sure that Ula is protected and that we actually trust him. Afilu Inish De'alma Nami Mehemen. We even believe any Yid, any one person. My Taima, what's the reason why we believe one Yid? We just said we don't believe one Yid when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. Why do we believe one Yid when it comes to Babel? Because Kol Milsa De'avida Le'igluye. Anything that will automatically become revealed in due time, Lo Meshakre Ba'inshi. People don't lie about that. I argue this principle based on the fact that there are children in the world who, even though you know you're going to find the graffiti with their name signed under it, they'll tell you that it wasn't me. So, but the Gemara says this as a halachic principle that in Bavel, any Yid can say that they were Mekadesh es HaChodesh in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because in due time, the message is going to get there properly. We're going to know when they kept Rosh Hashana, when they kept. In due time, things will clarify themselves. And therefore, even in Bavel, I should say, in Bavel, even a person who's not a Talmid Chacham, we would trust him. Tanya, the Brisa writes the same. Almost halfway down, the Brisa writes, we trust one person anywhere because of that same halachic logic of Kol Milsa De'avida Le'igluye. Any fact that will in due time automatically become revealed, lo meshakre ba'inshi, people don't lie about that. We had said in our Mishnah at the two dots, we had said, we used to accept Edus HaChodesh and Eretz Yisrael from everyone, but then the Baitusim got in the way. What's the story? Tanur Rabbanan, ma kilkul, kilkilu ha-Baitusim. What did these Baitusim do? Says the Gemara, a great story. It's like mafia. Pamachas bikshu Baitusim lahatos esachachamim. The Baitusim wanted to mess things up for the Jews. What did they do? Sicharu, they hired Shnei Bnei Adam B'Dalad Meos Zuz. They took 400 Zuz and they split it 200 a guy. So it's like all the movies. I'll pay you X amount for the hit. So here, the hit wasn't on a person's life. It was just to mess up the Chachamim and to be Mekadesh the Chodesh at the wrong time. So says the Gemara, they paid 200 per person. Echad mishalanu. Here was the mistake. We had an inside guy. They didn't realize that one of the people that they hired was from a Yid. He was a Ben Torah. The Echad Mishalahem, and the other guy was a Baitusi who was interested and invested in ruining the Jews. So fine. Shalahem Heid Edu Soviyatza. Their guy went in and gave testimony and said, the moon was like this. It's in this location, right above the mountain, right above the tree. The crescent looks like this, blah, blah, blah. He gave all the details and then he left. Then the second aide came in. Shalanu Amru, our guy says, Amrulo, they said to the Bezdin, Emor, the Bezdin said to him, Emor, Ketzad Rois Salavana. How did you see the moon? So give us your edus. Amar Lahem, and here there's a machlokes in the Meforshim. Was he just saying gibberish, or is there a deeper message here? Amar Lahem, Ole Hayisi b'Ma'ale Adumim. I was on the ascent of Ma'ale Adumim. The moon was crouching between two rocks. Rosh doma le'egel, its head was similar to an egel. Oznov, its ears, doma le'gdi, were similar to the ears of a gdi. Karnav domos le'tzvi, and its horns were similar to that of a deer. Uznavamu nachaslo ben yarkosav, and its tail was resting between its leg. V'yitzatzi bo v'nirtati v'nafalti la'achora. And I saw it, and I just fell backwards. The Mefarshim discussed was no moon looks like this, obviously. No moon looks like animals. So what was happening? So some of the Mefarshim say he was speaking gibberish so that they would know that he was trying to undo the edus. And he said, "V'im einatem ma'amininli," 3 lines into the Y lens. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you my purse of cash. Hare masayim zuz tzerurinli b'sadini. Look what I have. They gave me 200 zuz to come over here and try to lie. But I'm showing you that I'm a firm yid. He lied. Don't listen to their edus. Who told you to do this? I heard that the Baitusim wanted to mess people over. Amarti, I said, let me sneak my way in. Let me show them that I'm a Baitusi, pretend for a day, and then I'll be able to be one of the Edim. And I'll let the Bezdin know for real. Shema Yavo, Bnei Adam She'enin, who got him to let them know the people who are not fit are coming to teach you, are coming to give Edus, the Chachamim said to him, and this gets us into a big halachic shaila as we get close to the end of this sugya into the next Mishnah. You can keep the 200 zuz. Why can you keep the 200 zuz? You were given 200 zuz to do something that you didn't do. Afal pi that it's usher. You were given 200 zuz to say something. Why do you get to keep the money? I don't know. It's not the Bezdin's money. What?
They told him to lie and talk about the moon. That's what he did. He said he saw the moon.
Oh, that's gewaldig.
No, he clearly did not do what he was hired to do.
That is great. That is a great response, though. That's a great response. He said, "Go lie to Bezdin." He's like, "I got it." That's great. That's not what the Mefarshim say, but that's a great svara. Brilliant. That's really brilliant. But it's very strange because it's not his money to keep. So how does this work? I don't understand.
You have the power to issue fines.
Yeah, they have knasim. It's just it's mamish gneva deraisa. I'm just saying it's like usually we say by the chachamim that it's b'sheva al tasa. Here is this sheva al tasa? Or maybe it's sheva al tasa. They already have the money. That's what it says. V'asocharcha, the person who actually hired you, yimtach ala amud, stretch him out over the amud, meaning set him up to get his lashes. So they would lean people over a beam of some kind. That's how they would do the lashes. V'osashah, at that time, hiskinu shelo yehei mekablen ela minam akirin. At that time, they said, no more of this. We can't tolerate the risk that's involved of pushing off one holiday to the wrong time. And therefore, from that day forward, the only people who could give Edus HaChodesh were people who the Sanhedrin recognized. We'll stop right here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow, 8:40 in person with Daf Kaf Gimel. Have a good night. Wishing you all a beautiful night. What?